Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome those of you who have already joined us in the webinar room. We're going to give folks a couple of minutes to get in, and then we'll get started here shortly. Hi, once again, we're allowing just one more minute to get everyone into the room before we begin. Just a couple of upfront instructions. Most folks should be using their computers for audio, but you can also connect to audio using the provided telephone option. We're going to be using the chat box for questions today. We will be fielding questions throughout the webinar and delivering them to our panelists who will answer selected questions during the Q&A period at the end. Today's session is also being recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent to your email. My apologies to anyone watching that recording who attempted to register and attend the live webinar today, but was unable to join us due to the high interest for this topic. Again, thank you for joining us promptly today, and we'll get started in just a moment. Okay, it looks like the room has started to fill in pretty well, so I'd like to go ahead and start today's webinar. I'm Adam Griggs, the Science Manager here at River Network, and today we're hosting a group of scientists from the EPA to present their Green Infrastructure Modeling Toolkit. Before I turn it over and introduce our speakers, we may have a lot of folks in the audience today who are not necessarily familiar with River Network and the work that we do. So we are a national nonprofit coming up on 30 years of service to the water community. We dedicate ourselves to better connecting and equipping the organizations on the ground who perform the real work of protecting and restoring our water resources. In addition to hosting webinars like this one, we also support groups through an array of services, connecting practitioners to best practice resources and working to better network and engage the thousands of groups that collectively are working on water issues. River Network is a member-based organization, and we offer both free and subscription-level member services, helping groups stay connected and providing discounts on a variety of services, including registration for the National River Rally, this year being held in Olympic Valley, or Lake Tahoe, California. It's coming up April 29th to May 2nd. Registration is currently open, and if you have not attended a rally before, I strongly encourage you to do so. Talk to someone who has. Just take my word for it. And now I'd like to introduce Michelle Latham. She's a biologist with the Safe and Sustainable Water Resources Research Program at EPA, and she will be leading this webinar and introducing the remainder of our panelists today. Michelle?
Hey, thanks, Adam. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'd like to start out, I'm not sure if we did the poll at the beginning, but we would really appreciate knowing how many people are attending this webinar so we can get an idea of the outreach we're doing. So if you have more than one person in the room with you, we would really appreciate if you could type that number into your questions box on your navigation bar, and that would be really helpful for us. And also, if there's people in the room with you who would like a certificate for participating today, type the name of the additional people in the room with you, and we'll make sure they get those as well. So I just have a few slides at the beginning. Again, Adam introduced me, and again, thank you, Adam. Also, we'd really like to thank the River Network for inviting us to this webinar series and giving us this opportunity to reach more people with our toolkit. So we have a disclaimer here, and actually these slides we didn't mention either. You do have a handouts drop down in your navigation bar. This presentation is available there as a PDF. So you can either follow along or have it for future resource. And I provided a summary here for you so that when you use this resource, you have a summary of the webinar. And before we get started, I'm just going to give a really quick background for maybe people on the line who aren't as familiar with stormwater management and issues. There are several issues with stormwater management across the country. We have cities with combined sewer systems, which is stormwater and sewer waste combined in one pipe. And this can cause, when we have storms, this can cause wastewater facilities to get overwhelmed. So a lot of times the stormwater, which is polluted with different things that are picked up as it's running down the streets and roads, and it's discharged raw into water, receiving water. So sometimes we have untreated water being put into our water bodies. And also, as in what we've been seeing lately around the country, the past few days especially, is it can result in a lot of flooding as well when we're talking about traditional infrastructure, pipes. And as you can see here, there's some pictures of what traditional infrastructure looks like for stormwater management. And we do have, there was an EPA needs survey in 2012, and you can see here there's billions of dollars in need for stormwater management control. And so we have been studying, we consider green infrastructure one solution to stormwater management runoff issues. And green infrastructure is really a natural way of allowing water to reabsorb back into the environment as it would naturally. And you can see here the different practices that we consider green infrastructure. And benefits, of course, there's water quality benefits, but you also have other benefits. There are cost savings, community aesthetics, and air quality as well. So at EPA, we're working with states and communities. We're identifying implementation opportunities to provide either green infrastructure implementation or even a combination of green and gray, because we know everything can't be replaced with green infrastructure. So we've been working on developing models and tools to integrate green infrastructure or a combination into different communities for managing their stormwater. So over the years, we have been working to develop numerous models, and what we've done is pulled them together in a toolkit. And this toolkit it originally had 5 models when we started. We now have an addition, which you'll hear about today, our 6th model. And so the toolkit has the models, the manuals, fact sheets, and also a summary video. So it's a really good training video that you can use either in educational, in academia, or you can use it in your communities to kind of show people who are decision makers what these tools do, who can use them, and it'll help you make good choices as far as what model might work for you. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker for Green Infrastructure Wizard, and it's Dr. Marilyn Tenbrink, who is a special assistant to the director of our Atlantic Ecology Division in our lab, Narragansett lab. So with that, Marilyn, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Actually, you need to send it to Naomi's.
Okay, thanks. And again, if there's people, while we're waiting for the screen to come up, if there are people, again, who joined maybe a little later after we got started, if you could put the number of people in the room with you, we would really appreciate that. And at any point during the presentation, please feel free to type questions in the questions box, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. Okay, it looks good, Marilyn.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here to share with you Gwiz. Gwiz is a wizard that provides a searchable library for green infrastructure tools and resources. The data that is presented that's in Gwiz are EPA-approved tools and resources. So Gwiz is a database. It's an interactive web application that connects communities with these tools and resources. It's a wizard that provides customized links and exploration and a decision support tool for green infrastructure implementation. It's intended to provide a simple means to generate a report about tools and resources. Shown here on the right is a landing page for Gwiz, and you can reach Gwiz from this landing page through the link in it or directly to a Gwiz website. So why Gwiz? What we have are hundreds of tools and resources that have been published to aid GI practitioners in making management, implementation, and installation decisions, yet practitioners often don't know where to start or how to find what they need. So our research has resulted in comprehensive GI tools and resources inventory, descriptive attributes that are based on GI literature and state of practice and social sciences research. It's developed a dynamic, expandable, and interoperable information architecture that is designed to be a user-centric web interface. We're matching up the needs that people are expressing as far as trying to use green infrastructure for many, many different purposes and information about the tools and resources that will help them actually implement those practices. The basic logic that is used to develop Gwiz is matching up use cases and creating a streamlined pathway between particular management practices, the benefits that people are after and objectives that they have, specific tools classified by different types of tools, and other kinds of resources such as databases or publications or methodologies and case studies. So we have a wide range of types of material, both tools and all kinds of resources that are present in Gwiz. So what we're really trying to do here is inform, taking information about how people want to find information, what benefits green infrastructure provides and how they're communicated, and what is useful, and match people up. This is the front entry page of Gwiz. It has two different approaches. A wizard is more than a searchable library. It's using the decision logic that creates streamlined pathways for appropriate roles based on users, roles, and objectives. We have a Quicklinks and an Explorer version. The Quicklinks version shows you a very quick way of how efficient and accurate it is to use Gwiz. If you do a Google search on EPA, green infrastructure, regulator, and compliance, you'll get over 780,000 results. If you do just EPA searches and tools, you'll have hundreds. Whereas if you use Gwiz, you'll return about 48 samples that are really customized to what you need. And Gwiz has been available initially since 2015 in its first version, and we've had over 8,000 users actually implement access to information using the tool since that time. So in the first entry, the Quicklinks gives you a direct return to 3 quick questions: learning, researching, design, or assessing. The Explorer version, which has more detail and more customizable approaches, gives you questions about who you are, what you'd like to do, or you can use a keyword search that searches all kinds of different things, or you can pick any of these other choices. And now we're going to go dig into this a little bit deeper and see what you get returning when you choose this. Quicklinks, the Learn version, research, design, and assess, have bundled tools to get you where you want very quickly. Each of these has a second level of choices. Learn has, I want general questions, I want to understand, I'm interested in education. Design has 4 choices, research has 3 choices, and assess has 4 choices. So the 2-click for each of these under the Quicklinks will bring you to, 1, 2, 3 will give you a return of a set of tools, and these tools move into links to access information and URLs. Here, we'll look a little bit more closely for a quick link choice of research. You select, I want to find ways to pay for green infrastructure. It gives you a return of 66 different tools or resources that you might find useful. They're organized in categories. You move into the more information in those categories to look at the specific tools, use information to see a summary of them, or go through a URL to a detailed piece about the tool. You also have a listing of what the resource types are and the ability to like a tool, and it will save that information for you, and then you can download this list and use it in the future. For the Explore function, we have much more customizable features. Again, who you are, what you want to accomplish, what types of resources you're interested in, what your objectives are, what benefits you're interested in, if there are specific types of skills you're after, such as modeling, and what best management practices fit your needs. Now, in the Explore version, you may choose any combination of answers to any of these features. For example, you might say, I'm a city planner, I want to look at green streets, I want to find design manuals, I'm interested in tree planting for stormwater management. So you could get a very, very customizable return for potential results. Again, first step, pick one or more. Second step, pick details if you choose, and or use the keyword search. Here are all of the different options. Again, you can mix and match these different options to get returns. And if you want to see all of the results, you can go to the what resources there are and pick every single, select all, and you will get the return of 395 tools and resources that are present. Gwiz database is expandable. In this last year, we've added an updatable a methodology to add new resources. So if you have resources that you would like to see in here, you can tell us in the feedback and we can get those in. Gwiz is really helping you explore how to inform your decision. It can provide you methods to help understand your context, can help you define objectives and measures, develop different management options, look at trade-offs, make selections, and adapt, monitor, and move through iterative and adaptive management cycle in implementing green infrastructure. Again, you can look at who you are, also another choice, by just looking at your role, and we've pre-packaged a number of different tools that people with those roles find useful. So Gwiz is knowledge-based through collaboration. We've brought together lots of different perspectives about users and needs, and work together within EPA. As I said earlier, we had over 8,000 people use the tool. We've also had over 16,000 people come and learn about the tool. So Gwiz is helping people consider green infrastructure, to find the tools and resources that they need, to make sound decisions that advance green infrastructure implementation. If you'd like more information, you may contact me, Marilyn Ten Brink, or my colleagues Mike Nye and Bob Sachs, who are part of the collaborative development team of Gwiz. And we'll take questions in the chat at the end. And next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Naomi Deaton, who will be presenting WMOST.
Thank you. I'm happy to be presenting to you on the Watershed Management Optimization Support Tool, WMOST. The timing is very good. We just released version 3 of WMOST this past week, so it's available for download on the website, which I'll show later in the presentation, along with the theoretical documentation and user guide. So what is WMOST? WMOST is designed to support or facilitate the application of integrated water management at the small watershed and community scale. Basically, it allows the user to optimize cost across different practices to meet user-specified targets for either water quantity or water quality related goals. Quantity related goals could include things like base flows, maintaining base flows, minimizing peak flows, or maintaining water storage. Water quality goals could include water quality concentration to meet criteria, loads to meet TMDL targets, or you could specify the maximum number of CSO events you want to tolerate within a given time period. Because it's facilitating integrated water management, it looks at management options across multiple programs that are often stovepiped in their operation. These include stormwater programs, including green infrastructure, wastewater, drinking water, and land conservation practices. It's designed to support community decision makers and watershed planners. These could include regional planners, utility managers, or community consultants as examples. It is designed for screening level assessments. I've provided some examples of the kind of applications people have used or could use WMOST for. These include watershed implementation plans or TMDLs, providing supporting information for grants or loans, improving assessments for FEMA community rating system credits, for floodplain management. FEMA actually has some mitigation grants that will give you support for green infrastructure projects. It can help to support long-range strategies, so you can set up WMOST not only to look at current conditions, but at future conditions, looking at changes in development in watershed or future climate conditions. And finally, it can be used to develop integrated management plans, looking across requirements for wastewater permits and stormwater MS4 permits. WMOST can be used to ask or answer a wide range of questions. These are just some examples I've pulled from case studies that we worked with stakeholders on the past or are continuing to work with stakeholders on. The first two deal with water quantity related goals. In the first case, stakeholders needed to meet target base flows in the Ipswich River. They were exceeding sustainable use in that particular watershed. The next case study involves multiple goals, including flood control, recreational use, downstream aquatic life use, and sustainable water supply. The last three involve both water quantity and water quality issues, and these case studies are using WMOST version 3. So in the third case, stakeholders are interested in the value of natural and constructed green infrastructure to reduce flooding and deal with water quality impairments, not only under current conditions, but under future scenarios for watershed development and climate change. In the fourth case, we're working with the state of Maryland and stakeholders within the Cabin John Creek watershed to meet two different sets of goals. One targets to meet nitrogen, phosphorus, and suspended sediment loading targets for the Chesapeake Bay BMPL downstream, and also a local sediment TMDL. And Maryland is going to be using the results of this case study to create guidance to inform communities working on similar watersheds with similar targets. And then finally, stakeholders for the last case study are interested in cost-effective management practices to reduce water quality impairments for some TMDL subwatersheds of the Middle River in Kansas. And again, they're interested in looking to the future and managing for resilience in the face of climate change. WMOST starts out with baseline time series taken from existing watershed models. It accepts inputs from many commonly used hydrology and water quality models, for example, HSPF, SWOT, SWIM, and GWOF. WMOST version 3 allows the automated import of time series from existing calibrated models that we've pre-processed. We also provide a preprocessor for HSPF and SWOT models that you can use to format inputs for WMOST with your own models. In its operations, WMOST is linked with EPA's Sustain tool, which uses the SWIM model algorithms to calculate green and gray infrastructure runoff and load reductions. And if you're interested in using the flooding module, WMOST is set up to accept flood cost curves derived using FEMA's HAZUS tool, which can be populated with publicly available data from flood insurance studies available online. WMOST is built on a user-friendly Microsoft Excel interface. It's designed for Excel 2016, but it's also backward compatible to the 2013 and 2010 versions. This shows the first screen that you see when you open up WMOST. You can see there are a series of buttons that are linked to macros and instructions embedded in the application. So the blue button leads to a series of input data screens. Once you've finished adding your input data, you can go into the optimization module. This creates a series of files that are output and uploaded to an online server, the NEO server, which runs the optimization program. The output is then imported back into WMOST and processed to some user-friendly displays, including a results table that shows the least cost management option selected, as well as the level of implementation and associated costs. There are also some graphical displays. You can compare measured and target flows or water quality endpoints, and there's also a button leading to a calibration module. We have a wide range of management options that you can explore in WMOST, including land conservation, water conservation, demand management or incentives, changes in infrastructure for both drinking water and wastewater. This can include fixing leaks, increasing capacity, changing sources, or upgrading these systems to improve water quality. We also allow users to evaluate water reuse facilities and aquifer storage and recharge, interbasin transfers, and a wide range of best management practices, including green infrastructure. This is a list of the stormwater controls, the structural BMPs within WMOST. I won't read through the whole list here, but it's quite a few different types. In addition to these structural stormwater controls, we do include features for some non-structural BMPs, including urban nutrient management, tree canopies, and street sweeping. We have some alternative BMPs, such as riparian buffers, stream restoration, and outfall enhancements. And finally, since we're starting to support mixed land use watersheds, we've added a few agricultural BMPs, including filter strips, surface and subsurface gravel wetlands, and sedimentation ponds. We're continuing to add functionality to WMOST. These are some of the things we're working on currently. We're adding to the data library of pre-processed models. I've shown a list here of some of those that we'll be adding. We are working on robust decision-making modules, which take advantage of WMOST and help the user to find robust solutions in the face of uncertainty in future climate scenarios. We are working on a co-benefits module, which will allow the user to examine ancillary benefits of the management practices, including GI, such as ecosystem benefits, human health, energy savings, improvements in real estate values, reductions in drinking water treatment costs, etc. We have a number of training and tech transfer activities going on. In addition to this webinar, yesterday we had a webinar just focusing on WMOST. That will be available on the EPA Tools and Resources website. We have another upcoming webinar that will go into more detail on March 8th as part of the EPA's water quality modeling webinar series. We also have training materials posted online on the website, so you can refer to that for more information. We are also creating a parallel version of WMOST. WMOST optimizes only for cost, but allows people to address multiple goals as constraints. The multiple objective version of WMOST will allow people to look at different objectives simultaneously and to generate trade-off curves. And finally, we're starting to look at scaling up and linking watersheds. WMOST is currently designed to deal with the small watershed scale, say HUC 12 to HUC 10, to about 10,000 to 40,000 hectares. This is the site for downloading WMOST. You can get access not just to the WMOST file, but also theoretical documentation in user guide, as well as the pre-processors. And the README file on this screen gives you a list of everything that's available. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Bob McCain to talk about the Velma model, visualizing ecosystems for land management assessment.
Thank you, Naomi. See, I'm trying to get control of the screen here. And I should say that we've been having a little trouble. Michelle, the screen just disappeared completely for me. So what I will
we
do...
can see your slide.
Yeah.
Just need to
We can see your
enter presentation.
Oh, okay. So let's see.
And why, again, this is Michelle, why Bob is getting his slides ready. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to type those in the questions box. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end of all the presentations today. And it looks like it looks good.
Okay, I'm not seeing my whole screen, so I need to reduce part of this or bring this forward. I'm not sure how to do that. All right, so are you seeing the part of the screen over here? Can you tell me how to get rid of that?
We see your full slide.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll just proceed. I don't know if I can reduce this somehow, but there we go. Thank you. Thanks. So Velma stands for Visualizing Ecosystem Land Management Assessments. It's an EPA model. We've developed it over the last 10 years to do green infrastructure assessments, and the purpose is to identify best management practices for enhancing water quality and ecosystem service co-benefits. As you can see in the right side of this frame, it can do a lot of things in agricultural and other settings, and I won't go through all the types of things it can do, but basically it's very similar to what Naomi just showed in terms of being able to address various green infrastructure practices. We're working especially across different ecosystems, ag, forest, and rangeland, and we're currently developing a urban application for urban green infrastructure, and that's going very well. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Our users include communities, tribes, land managers, and EPA regions 7, 10, and 3, and we've been really excited about working with different communities, especially under the SHC Sustainable and Healthy Community Program under EPA's ORD program. And most of our work currently is focused in the Pacific Northwest and Great Plains and East Coast, and I'll talk about 2 of those applications. Okay, so Velma is a watershed model. It provides a look at fate and transport of water and nutrients, and it scales from small plots up to watersheds, including regional watersheds such as the Puget Sound ecosystem. And we've simulated 10,000 square mile area in eastern Kansas, and I'll mention that briefly too. But the idea behind Velma is that it's a very fine scale look at green infrastructure. The watersheds are divided up into a grid. The user can specify the grid size. We go as low as 2-meter size grids for various purposes such as urban applications. And this allows us to look at how riparian buffers function. Velma is an eco-hydrological model, meaning that it's a hydrological model linked very tightly to a biogeochemical model, in other words, a nutrient cycling model. And we're also entering contaminant cycling into this as well. It simulates the effects of climate and land use on stream flow and transfers within soil columns. It represents vegetation and soil interactions, and so it simulates the uptake, transformation, and transport of carbon, nutrients, and toxics from terrestrial to aquatic systems. And it does a very good job of that. We've done a lot of validation. Each pixel in the grid is represented by a soil column and vegetation on top of that, and cycling of water and nutrients and contaminants occurs, and then downslope of each pixel, transfers of water, nutrients, and toxics can occur. So if there's a stream over here, and this is just a land cover, represents different land cover types, and if you can tell Velma where to do disturbances, such as, in this case, a clear cut, how that increases flow downslope because there's no evapotranspiration at that point. And buffers provide very good protection, as we all know, for stream water quality. And it simulates that. If these near stream areas are cut, then you get an increase in the flow of water and nutrients to the stream. And that impacts fish habitats. And we're linking to various wildlife and fish habitat models to look at consequences downstream. Simulated ecosystem services include effects of climate and management on water quality, drinking water, recreational opportunities, and also flood protection. Food and fiber production is included. This is all dynamic. Simulations run from days to centuries if you need to do that. It also simulates carbon sequestration and opportunities for carbon trading. I'll talk about that briefly. Also, climate regulation through greenhouse reduction. And that's all in the biogeochemistry of the model. And as I said, we're linking to fish habitat models especially, and ultimately also terrestrial wildlife. So Velma's been applied in many places across the country. Starting down here, we began with the Chesapeake Bay Agricultural Forest Buffer Effectiveness Study, and I'll talk about that. And I'll also focus on salmon recovery planning in Puget Sound and how that's going. And we're working at the scale of national estuary programs out west here, Tillamook Bay and also Puget Sound. We are nearing completion on a smoke management planning effort with Region 7 in the eastern Kansas, and just moving into urban green infrastructure effectiveness. So let me begin with an example, the Chesapeake Agricultural Water Quality project that we began a few years ago now, working with the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, and we've validated Velma for an example study that was intensively studied. The Smithsonian Center is right on the western side of Chesapeake Bay. Here's, you can see up in this corner about where that is in Maryland. And they've been monitoring this 20-hectare watershed for about since the late 1970s, and a classic paper describing how buffers protect water quality coming out of these ag streams and going into Chesapeake Bay. You can see the eutrophication that's occurring here. It's really amazing to stand on a dock here that the Smithsonian group has. It's hard to see even a couple inches through that. So what we found using Velma is that basically confirming some classic studies on how denitrification protects stream water quality to some extent. And where buffers do occur, they do a good job of transforming nitrate, which is a eutrifying pollutant, and converts that to nitrogenous gases and releases that into the atmosphere. And we see here, Velma allows animation over daily and annual time steps. And this is just showing hotspots for denitrification. Red is very intense denitrification. Blue is very low, and the stream runs here, and you can see by the time the water flows downslope toward the stream, it's fairly low in denitrification activity. And I want to point out that during a drought, dry conditions, there's very low denitrification. That year, 2002, was followed by heavy rains, record rains, and you can see the denitrification process light up, which is basically keeping as much nitrate out of the stream that eventually runs into Chesapeake Bay. But it's leaky. During this deluge of 2003, the riparian buffers were actually overwhelmed and couldn't perform as well as you would like to see. So that's shown here. This is simulated nitrate in groundwater flow, and you can see how much breakthrough there is during this deluge. Very interesting results. And we did sensitivity analyses that showed that buffers, present-day buffers, were working quite well in most years until that deluge, and that they can reduce ag nitrate sources by about 90%, keeping that much out of the stream. If you were to cut the existing buffers back, that would increase the nitrate load by about 50%. So the message here is that buffers work really well, but they can be overwhelmed by extreme climatic events. And so perhaps, one option would be to think about cutting back on fertilizers. And Velma does trade-offs between ag production and water quality protection. I'm not going to show that here. There just isn't enough time. But the model results are consistent with the observed sharp decrease in Chesapeake water quality in 2003. In 2002, which was the drought year, this is a satellite translation of chlorophyll concentration, in other words, algal blooms within the bay. And you can see it's, not great, but it's not doing too bad. 2003, when all the fertilizers had built up during the drought year, and then more fertilizer added in 2003, you can see that there was a major algal bloom all across Chesapeake Bay. So Velma is really indicating why that bloom happened, that there was breakthrough through the existing buffers. And so as I say, one consideration for decision makers is to what should be the cap, if there should be one, on ag fertilization to avoid this sort of thing. Moving to Puget Sound, we're working with tribes and communities in Puget Sound to assist them with salmon recovery planning. Salmon populations in Puget Sound have decreased by about 90% during the last 30 years. And tribes and communities and others have mobilized to develop recovery plans. They are currently using Velma to look at effects of land management on stream flow and woody debris, and we've also built a stream temperature model into Velma that then we can pass all this information to a fish habitat model and parse out how different species of salmon are affected. And a key result of that is that for the system we're studying, Puget Sound is up over here in the upper left. The river that we're studying flows off Mount Rainier, flows 80 miles to Puget Sound. And this is the primary salmon producing tributary to the Nisqually River. And heavily harvested, as you can see, these lighter areas in this satellite photo are clear cuts. And so what we found is that by going to longer rotations, summer stream flow could be doubled. Not enough time to get into that story, but it's basically an age effect on transpiration that causes this stream flow increase. And so we are able to inform policies that are being considered to try to increase summer stream flows for salmon when they try to swim upstream in the late summer and spawn. Right now in this watershed, which used to have 10,000 steelhead come up in the fall, they're down to about a couple hundred steelhead. And so right on the brink of extinction. Chinook salmon have already gone extinct there. So a key thing is trade-offs, as our other presenters have talked about. And this is, we're currently working through final simulations for the study watersheds and comparing industrial forest practices, which seek to basically increase timber yield and profit for shareholders. Very few local dollars result from that to local communities because the timber gets sent out to overseas. And the community forest approach that we're working with various community forests in the region, and we're trying to balance ecological, economic, and cultural benefits for tribes and communities, and coming up with solutions that end up with a better balance of efforts, and including ecosystem carbon stocks. The community forest owners that we work with have just made the first deal in Washington State to sell carbon credits to Microsoft, who wants to balance their carbon budget. So that's it, and thank you. I would like to introduce Michael Tribby, and he's going to talk about SWIM.
Great presentation, Bob. Thanks. Can everybody hear me? I will take that as a yes.
You're good, Michael. We can hear you.
Okay, and I trust that you can see my presentation.
It's getting there.
Okay. How about
okay, you're good. Thanks. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about, switch gears a little bit here. Bob talked about Velma, which is a great model for dealing with natural watersheds and rivers. And I'm going to talk about SWIM, which is applied in urban watersheds. So you can think of, the major difference is that an urban watershed is dominated by man-made drainage structures like curbs and streets and curbs and hard surfaces and stormwater catch boxes, and a network of sewer pipes that conveys stormwater and sanitary wastewater to treatment plants. Okay, and SWIM is a model for simulating these types of environments and the drainage structures found in these types of environments. So we call that urban hydrology and hydraulics modeling. A key feature of SWIM is that it's a dynamic model. So it allows the user to predict the transient response of the drainage system to a storm event. And this is important so that we can determine if the drainage network is sized properly and is going to perform the way that it is intended to perform. So SWIM, which stands for the Stormwater Management Model, has a comprehensive set of capabilities for modeling the processes that are found in urban watersheds. These include rainfall runoff, pollutant washoff, the actual flow in the sanitary and storm sewers, groundwater infiltration and inflow into sewer conduits and pipes, and also pollutant transport, treatment, and removal. And SWIM has been around for a really long time. It's nearly as old as I am. It's going to be 50 years old in 2021. And it was, in its early history, it was written in Fortran. And in the early 2000s, it was redeveloped and rewritten entirely in the C programming language. And it has been under active development by the EPA since the early 2000s. So who uses SWIM? Well, SWIM is a professional tool that's used by licensed civil, environmental, and stormwater engineers. It is used by municipalities that design, maintain, and manage stormwater infrastructure and sanitary sewer infrastructure. And we're proud that SWIM is used across the United States and around the world. We routinely take support requests from consultants who serve municipalities in the United States, and we take questions from all over the world: South America, China, other parts of Asia, Africa, Europe. And what do these people use SWIM for? Well, specifically, they use SWIM to design and size their man-made drainage system components. They use it to develop control strategies for combined sewer overflows, like Michelle described at the beginning of the talk, or of the presentation. They model groundwater inflow and infiltration into sanitary sewer systems. They can use SWIM to better understand non-point source pollution in urban watersheds. And they can use it to evaluate green infrastructure, stormwater control alternatives. And it's used for floodplain mapping of natural channels. One of the most recent additions to SWIM is the capability to model structural green infrastructure BMPs. So SWIM includes process models for a wide complement of green infrastructure controls. And there's many different types to choose from that can be used in many, flexibly used in many different drainage control applications. So now I'm gonna switch gears and just talk a little bit about, do a little example for you to show you what the SWIM model can do. And because SWIM is widely used and it combines the ability to model both green and your typical gray infrastructure stormwater control strategies, it's an ideal platform for developing and evaluating hybrid control, which is stormwater runoff control strategies combining both green and gray infrastructure. So this example is designed to illustrate that. So this is a typical SWIM application. It's an urbanized catchment of 500 acres, and it produces a average daily flow of 1 million gallons of wastewater per day. And when it rains, this combined sewer overflow gets activated about 64 times annually. And so that would result in a direct discharge of stormwater and combined stormwater and wastewater into the river, which is something that we don't want. So to try and prevent that from happening, they are looking at installing a storage unit to intercept the excess flow and store it, and then after the storm has passed, to release that storage to the treatment plant at a time when it can handle the extra flow. So that's the conventional gray infrastructure approach, would be to install storage. An alternative control strategy would be to install green infrastructure controls throughout the watershed to promote infiltration of water in place and reduce the runoff, the total runoff coming off of the catchment. So here you can see what the storage unit would look like. It's a prefabricated storage unit that would be installed below ground, and the design task for the engineer would be to determine how much storage volume would be required, and then to design the piping and the pumping systems to convey it to the wastewater treatment plant. And then we have a green infrastructure control strategy, which would involve placing porous pavement installations and street planters around the 500-acre catchment in such a way that they would directly intercept runoff and infiltrate it into the ground in place. And these porous pavers and street planters would be located in public right-of-ways, like along in the street or in the right-of-way adjacent to the street. And then to promote additional infiltration, they're also looking at alternatives of installing rain gardens and downspout disconnection rain barrels on private property. So using SWIM, we can use historical rainfall data, and we could simulate runoff conditions and sewer pipe flows in this catchment area, and we can generate the trade-off between the CSO reduction that we desire and the amount of gray storage volume that's necessary to reduce those CSO events. And so we have our three control scenarios illustrated here. The gray only is the lower gray line, and it indicates that to achieve a 85% reduction in CSO frequency, it is necessary to have a 2.5 million gallon interceptor storage. If we combine the gray infrastructure strategy with green stormwater control strategies, we can reduce the total storage necessary. So by combining these strategies, we can install a storage pipe with only 1 million gallons in total storage, and then offset the rest of that volume with increased infiltration throughout the watershed at our GI installations. And we get the same level of CSO control, and we also get the benefit of neighborhood beautification and other co-benefits from the GI installation. So just to wrap up, SWIM is widely used across the country and around the world to design gray infrastructure control strategies. And now that SWIM offers LID controls, it's a very useful tool for investigating hybrid control strategies. And that is the conclusion of my presentation. And now I'll turn it over to Jason Bernagras to talk about the National Stormwater Calculator.
Hi, Jason, are you on the line? Jason, if you're on the line, we can't hear you. Can you unmute your phone? Okay. Adam, have we switched to Jason?
Yes, we are viewing Jason's screen, and it says he is self-muted.
Okay. Jason, you may need to go to your navigation bar and unmute yourself there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Got it, yep.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Too much muting power there. Thanks, Michael, for the introduction. So I'm going to talk briefly about the National Stormwater Calculator, which is actually based off of EPA's SWIM model. And the way I like to think about it is it's been called sort of a TurboTax version of SWIM. So the calculator has SWIM programmed in the background of it, and it is meant to do the same type of pre and post construction stormwater runoff analysis as SWIM, but it's geared towards smaller sites, so sites that are less than an acre to about a dozen acres in size. And it is been developed for non-modelers and can be used anywhere throughout the U.S., including Puerto Rico, Alaska, and Hawaii. And this is our website for the calculator, where we have both a new mobile web app version of it and a desktop application of the calculator. So we have a lot of the same applications as some of my colleagues have presented earlier for the calculator. It has been used to assist state and municipal agencies with their post-construction permit standards. It's been used by property owners for voluntary stormwater retrofits. It's been used for design competitions and for some resiliency efforts, such as Rockefeller 100 Resilient Cities, and is also listed as one of the U.S. Green Building Council's stormwater recommended tools for LEED credits. So we've worked with a few communities over the last couple of years with the stormwater calculator doing capacity building and also assisting communities that are currently requiring the use of the calculator for the application for grant funding. These are some of the communities that we've worked with throughout the country. So as I had mentioned, there's a desktop application version of the calculator, which is what you see here. And then we recently released a web version of the calculator this past fall. So they are really the same tool, except with the web app. It is, you're able to use it with an internet connection. That's all you need. You can use it on tablets, smartphones, laptop. So as long as you have web capability, you can use the new web version wherever you are. So we have a new cost estimation module, which we released this past spring, and this helps users like yourselves be able to estimate planning level cost of your projects. So being able to know what the high and low cost of your projects may be, including construction costs and then average annual operation and maintenance costs. We do want to stress that it doesn't give final construction cost nor life cycle cost, but it does provide that planning level costs, and we have regional costs for most areas of the United States, with a few exceptions in some of the western states. So this is some example screenshots of our web app on a smartphone and also on a tablet. And you can save it as a favorite or bookmark it as a favorite on any internet web browser. So I'm going to go quickly through an application of the web app version of the calculator in northern Michigan. This is an actual project where our Great Lakes program has been coordinating with the city of Northport, Michigan, in the design and planning of a Green Streets project. And so with this application, they did not use the calculator for their planning and design purposes, but I wanted to show how in the planning stages of such a project, the calculator can be used by communities. So in stepping through the calculator, you'll see in the web app on the left-hand side, there are icons for various data sets that we've integrated into the calculator. And all these data sets are available anywhere throughout the country that you use the calculator. You don't have to have any data uploaded into it. We've programmed that for you. So the first 3 tabs that I'll go through are based on soils data that we retrieve from the USDA. And the first polygon that you see here is the amount of runoff from your site. So you click on whatever polygon your project is located on. In this case, it's a low runoff polygon. And then you click to the next icon, which is a little bucket pouring out water, and this is representative of the amount of the rate of infiltration of runoff for that same soil polygon that you selected before. And this will give you an estimate of the inches per hour of water infiltrating into the soils for your site. And then the last characteristic of the soils is the amount of slope. And it ranges from flat to steep. And again, you can select the polygon that's representative of your site. And in this case, it's a 2% flat slope. And then next, we have an icon for precipitation and potential evaporation. We have thousands of historical weather stations throughout the country that you can select, and they range in time periods of approximately 30 to 15 years of historical record. You can select the station of interest, both for precipitation and evaporation, and you can see the dates that the weather has been measured for, and the annual rainfall, and also what the the average daily potential evaporation is. And you can also download this data if you'd like to manipulate it outside of the calculator. The last weather icon is this globe, which stands for our climate change tab. And this lets users, if you would like, to look at different bookend representations of climate change scenarios. And we have a near-term and a far-term scenario, so looking at about 30 to approximately 60 years out into the future. We have some helpful resources that are listed towards the upper left that can give our users information on which climate scenarios are most applicable for their area of the country. On the right hand of the screen, you'll see the top graph shows the different scenarios that you're able to choose and the percent change in monthly rainfall associated with each of those scenarios. And then towards the bottom right corner, we have max annual daily rainfall, which is looking at what that is for different return periods, ranging from a 5 to 100 year storm. And then the next icon, you're looking at land cover. You can put in existing land cover or proposed land cover. We have 4 types that user can identify based on percentage, and then whatever is left over from what you've put in will be assumed to be impervious cover for your site. And then this is the most exciting part, I think, where user get to select the amount of impervious cover for your site that is managed by each LID or low impact development control. You can click on the name of each LID control and you can pop out a window which allows you to size your LID control, or you can auto size it based on a design storm. And then with our project cost, there are a few things that you enter information about, such as if it's a redevelopment or a new development site. If you have poor to excellent site suitability, so thinking about what's the slope of your site, the access of construction materials, of equipment to your site, are there any existing utilities to be aware of? And then lastly, you will pick a cost region. So the cost region is where we've taken data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on what are some of the most common materials and types of labor classes that actually do construction and operation and maintenance on these types of controls. And we have data that is updated annually from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that feeds into regression equations that we've developed for each of the LID controls based on available literature. And then last, you hit refresh results, and you will get different report outs on statistics for the amount of runoff that's controlled by the type of LID practices that you've chosen. And those reports can be selected on the bottom left. And this is an example of the cost summary for capital cost and maintenance cost. And lastly, I just wanted to say some next steps that users can use these results for can be sharing with decision makers, applying for funding, and helping with the development of implementation plans for projects. This is an example of how some training on the calculator assisted a community in Baltimore, Maryland with receiving grant funding. And then we have, obviously, if you want to learn more, we have a great user's manual and a fact sheet that you can also read up more about the Stormwater calculator. Okay. And then I would like to introduce my colleague, Dr. Ashrash Masdiya. Dr. Ashra has developed the Green Infrastructure Flexible Model tool and is a professor in civil engineering at Catholic University.
Okay. Hello, everyone.
Did we lose? Oh, there you are.
Okay. Oh, okay. So let's see. Okay. Do you see my screen well?
Yep. You're good.
Okay. Sorry, gotta go do. Okay. Hello, everyone. Jason, thank you for the introduction. So the tool that I'm going to talk about today is GIFMod. It's a relatively new tool. Most of the models that are used for evaluating the impact of green infrastructure or agriculture, BMPs, and some of them were, referred to, or talked about during this, the previous presentations, are essentially designed for larger scale or watershed scale applications. Now GIFMod is designed to basically allow users to evaluate the performance of individual GIs or green infrastructure or BMPs while considering the processes within them. So the aim has been to make basically allow the users to build a model that can represent detailed processes controlling hydraulics, particle transport, and basically chemical fate and transport in the systems. It's the philosophy behind basically developing GIFMod has been to make it as flexible as possible and then expandable. So basically, an effort has been put so that the least amount of things are hard coded, and then the modeler can basically design or conceptualize their system as they desire. So essentially, GIFMod consists of 3 layers. One is the hydraulics layer that represent basically flow of water inside these systems. And then there is a particle or colloid transport module that deals with the fate and transport of particles within these green infrastructure systems, and also a dissolved or actually a reactive chemical transport module that is within that. Now, it can be used, for example, without the particle component, or it can also only be used for hydraulics evaluation without any transport. Some of the features of GIFMod are it basically allows user-defined chemical constituents and reaction networks. So all the interaction between chemical constituents considered or all the water quality processes are defined by the user. It has a tool for both maximum likelihood or deterministic parameter estimation and also probabilistic parameter estimation. So if you have some data available and we want to, for example, calibrate our model or find estimates on the parameters so that the model outputs match measured data, it can be done automatically. It can do sensitivity analysis. As I said, it's expandable, so it has been written so that we can easily add additional features and blocks and things like that to it. It also has these kind of wizard or template feature that allows users to basically select certain type of green infrastructure and then answer some questions, and then that the tool actually develops the model for the users. It has a scripting capability, so models can be created using some scripts, and this is actually for some complex models or large models. It may be easier to develop models using scripts rather than using the drag and drop feature of the model. It has an application programmable interface. I'm going to talk about a little more, but then it allows GIFMod to be incorporated into other programs, and it's also open source. So essentially, the model is based on these blocks and components. So the user can actually build a model by basically introducing some blocks representing different parts of the system, and then connectors representing basically their connection or how things are transferred from one block to another block. So what you see here is, for example, if I want to model a stormwater pond, it may be you may want to just consider a single pond and then consider the chemical reactions happening in it, and then also define, for example, the flow rate out of the pond as using a rating curve, kind of relating the storage in the pond, the flow out. But then you may also want to make it a little more complex by maybe breaking down the pond into two components. We may be interested in, for example, modeling the processes happening in the sediments underneath these ponds. For example, if the sediments may become anoxic and then some denitrification may happen, we may add a soil layer and then consider the interactions between the pond and the soil. You may want to look into more more details about the processes happening in the sediments, so then we can discretize the soil into several layers. If you want to model a bioretention system, it may have a storage layer, so we can put a storage layer underneath this engineered soil. And then we may also be interested in, for example, finding the effect on groundwater, in which case we can actually include groundwater. So the processes that can be considered in the model include, as I said, water quality. We can model reactive transport. We can also model bacterial growth explicitly. It can model transport of particles, colloids, and consider processes such as filtration and settling that are important for many types of green infrastructure. It can do basically model particle facilitated transport. So that's when some chemical constituents like heavy metals can bind to fine particles and be transported by them. It can do aeration or external flux. So, for example, if you have a stormwater pond and it's basically we aerate to keep it basically oxygenated. It does some evapotranspiration modules, a few options, actually Penman, FAO56, Priestley-Taylor. Evapotranspiration can be introduced as a time series as well. And there are some other models that also consider transpiration. Then we have plants. It has a plant block. I'm going to talk a little more, but it basically we can model plant growth, uptake of chemical constituent by plants, and also transpiration through the plants. We can do build up and wash off of contaminants. For example, if you have a catchment, a parking lot, and some build up of contaminants happen, and then it's washed off during the rain events, it can be modeled. And also it has this PID control feature that allows, for example, if you want to design a smart green infrastructure where, for example, the effluent is controlled, we can actually do that. So what you see here is, I said the reactive transport is basically completely user-defined. The figure that I have on the left-hand side, bottom of the slide, is essentially the way we can enter basically processes, water quality processes or chemical reactions. So here, for example, I had nitrification, aerobic growth, and anoxic growth. And as you can see, there's a column for process rate where we define the process rate. So this process rate can be just simple first order decay or something, or it can be more complex, like, for example, dual monokinetics and things like that. And then you have some other columns for each of the chemical constituents considered in this particular model. Those are essentially stoichiometric constants. So the model by default, first of all, it's possible to add additional blocks from outside of the code by just providing some relationships between head and storage in the blocks, and then some relationship between head and flow between the blocks. But then it has 7 pre-programmed blocks, including unsaturated soil that uses basically recharge equation with Wangenecton-Mullen relationship for basically solving the system. Saturated soil for groundwater, it has ponds, storage, sub-catchment, plants, and streams. Okay, so basically I'm going to really quickly show you this animation. This shows how basically the animation doesn't show you how the model is built, but it shows kind of give you an idea about how the model works. So this is actually a model of a rain garden without under drain system. We have we have an engineered layer of soil, and then we have native soil at the bottom. So the 4 top yellow blocks are basically engineered soil, and then we have native soil, and we have groundwater and the receiving water, and then we can specify the properties of all these blocks. We have a catchment that contributes into the rain garden, and that the properties can be altered. So now I'm basically running the model. It checks to make sure that all the required information for all the blocks are given. So we got 0 errors, and we can run it. And then we can look at the results. For example, flow. This is actually flow from the catchment to the rain garden. How much runoff entered the rain garden. The water depth in the rain garden. So we see sometimes ponding happen over the rain garden. We have some outflow basically into the receiving water, moisture content in the soil, and so forth. So I'm going to skip this. It has a wizard component, so that means basically there's a list of catalog of predefined models. We are now in the process of populating this. At this time, we have a template for rain garden, for permeable pavement, green roof, and also a 2-dimensional soil model. So it allows users to use to basically select from the list of available catalogs, and then some questions are asked about the dimension of the system, about the properties of different basically parts of the system, and so on, and the model is created for the user. So this is basically a kind of one simple example that we did using GIF-mod. So this was essentially a rain garden system in a residential basically community in Cincinnati, Ohio. So they had this dual rain garden system with under drain and overflow. So essentially, so on the right-hand side of the image, you can see this basically parking lot, and then you can see the 2 rain gardens, and then there is this catchment that is contributing into the parking lot and eventually to the rain garden system. There's another photo of the rain garden system here, and this was monitored for a long time for both hydraulic performance and water quality. So basically, we essentially made a model of the entire system, but the figure on the left-hand side of the screen is actually a conceptualization of the rain garden system. So as you see, there's engineered soil that was basically discretized into 5 layers and 3 columns, essentially. And then we have the storage layer, and then there's a pipe that carries water from the storage layer into a manhole, and then it goes to the surface of the second rain garden, and so on. And then we also wanted to model the catchment processes. So we made a model of the catchment. Basically, this is a wooded area that is contributing into a parking lot. And you see a diagram of the models. We actually did it in 2 different ways. One was more detailed, so by essentially discretizing or breaking down the catchment into 3 columns, each of them having a topsoil, a bottom soil, and then groundwater. And then the other one is the more simple one that basically the entire catchment is basically represented using a single block of overland flow topsoil, bottom soil, and the groundwater. And in this case, the reason why we split topsoil from bottom soil was that basically we know that the bottom soil is has a very low hydraulic conductivity, but topsoil has a larger hydraulic conductivity, and we knew that some base flow as a result of that happens into the parking lot. Here are some results, some model measured comparison. So the 2 graphs that you see on the left-hand side of the screen are basically the comparison between modeled and measured results for flow outside of the catchment. We did basically the top one is calibration, and then we also did validation. So the bottom figure is the validation results, and then we have the measured model comparison between the outflow from the upper rain garden and the lower rain garden on the right-hand side of the screen. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. So potential applications of GIF-mod actually can be used to evaluate long-term performance of individual green infrastructure. It can be used for design optimization. For example, if you want to make a change to our design and see what the effect is going to be, we can actually use GIF-mod as a good tool to do that. We can use it to estimate physical and chemical parameters affecting GI performance, and then to be able to use GIF-mod for basically predictive applications. We can use it to predict the effectiveness of novel designs of green infrastructure, or explore ideas, design ideas and so on. We can also use it to, for example, come up with some effective models that can then be incorporated into, or some effective parameters for the performance of GIs that can later on be used to, for example, in larger scale models such as SWIM and so forth. And it can also be used for research and education. Now, GIF-mod is relatively new compared to all the other models that was talked about. So it has a smaller user base. I hope this is going to increase in the future. But then currently, actually, we are using it to describe some monitoring data on a subsurface vegetated bed, agricultural BMP actually. We are using it to evaluate the effect of stream restoration in a site in Washington, D.C. I have one PhD student who is trying to use it to basically describe catchment processes at a urban catchment, essentially in Sligo Creek, Maryland. And then basically there are some planning to use GIF-mod to evaluate the performance of some green infrastructure in the Villanova University in Pennsylvania.
Aras?
Yes,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're out of time. We're going to have to, I hate to cut you short, but we've reached our time and I've got to let Adam, so thank you so much for presenting,
Sorry
but I'll let
yeah.
Adam.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Arad. Thank you, Michelle, and all the rest of our panelists for taking the time to join us today. We have unfortunately run out of time for the Q&A session, but we have collected all of your questions and have shared them with the appropriate panelists who should be able to follow up with you directly. We have your emails from registration and so forth. Also, a recording of this webinar will be available shortly after the close. You should also get a link and a follow-up email. And please do also take our survey so we can try to improve these webinars and our services in the future. So hope to see all of you at River Rally in April, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Great. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.